Good morning, Coach Clare. How you doing?
Good morning, Ben. Yeah, good. How are you?
Good, lovely backdrop, very appropriate.
Thank you. I thought so.
It's,
Yeah.
it's the closest I've been to being inside a gym for some time now. So,
I know. I'm pretty lucky this is my garage. Yeah, it's cool. Doesn't necessarily mean I use it as much as I should.
I think that's been the case for quite a few, right? It kind of shows, and I guess that's a really good segue into what we're going to talk about. That even when you do have all the means right on your doorstep, sometimes still the motivation to get out and use it is the hardest part. Is getting into the gym, right? The hardest part of the workout is getting into the gym. So
Yeah.
nice to know, I guess, that I'm not the only one that feels that way. And I guess nice to know that it's also coaches that sometimes, that we're not perfect and we struggle with the same things our clients do. And I guess that's what causes that kind of relatability, right?
Yeah, absolutely. People presume that just because you're a coach, you don't need anyone to coach you, and you've just got this inbuilt motivation to do it yourself. Whereas I don't. I have a coach. So during COVID, I've been doing Zoom classes just to keep myself accountable. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen for me. So I struggle just as much as anyone else.
I will say this though, it's definitely good to be a coach for inspiration with clients because you're like, oh, if I'm telling them to do it, like I better go and do it myself. Right?
That's right. It keeps you accountable, but I think it also relatable as well. Like I understand how people are feeling when they're just lacking that motivation, especially over recent months. I totally get where they're coming from. So it kind of prompts me then to explore um, in a little bit more detail how you would help someone find that motivation or that self-discipline or whatever it is they're struggling with.
Yeah.
So it's
It's
been
that
a really useful exercise. Yeah.
it's that kind of bursting of the bubble, right? When when you meet your celebrities and you're always disappointed because they're just like real people, right? And I
Yeah.
think it's sort of the same, yeah, we're coaches by I guess by trade and what we're doing for a career, but we're also, got families. I get to call myself a parent now as well. So I feel like I've joined that kind of illustrious club. And you kind of lead firsthand with examples of how to try to find a balance being or having a family and having a career and also having endeavors that fall within health and wellness.
Yeah, and we're not immune to any of the things that brings. We're not immune to being exhausted from running around after kids. Just because we might work out more than the average person doesn't mean we're immune to, craving chocolate or things like that. It's very normal.
Yeah. Well, I guess the the conversation that we wanted to have today stemmed from our weekly team meeting, and part of that meeting, I guess we look at our social media and the kind of stuff that we're going to be posting over the next few weeks. And the conversation that you and I in particular have is making sure that what's being posted is not necessarily niching ourselves towards that purely athletic population. I think that's probably been over the last almost 5 years the biggest bridge that we've tried to cross with social media is it's easy for us, not easy, but it's easier for us to work with recreational athletes, and professional athletes because they're a community within the population that understands the value of health and nutrition, right? But when we look at as a business and as a brand wanting to have as big an impact on the community as possible in a positive way as far as health outcomes are concerned, the majority of the community is not recreational to high elite level athletes. So if we're going to be true to our cause, for us, the biggest challenge is how do we cross that bridge and branch out from those people who, for the most part, are already top 10% of the community in terms of their health, and reach those people that perhaps need our help the most, but maybe have the least desire to, or the least knowledge or know-how on how to get started and how to get into it.
Yeah, I think there is a real misconception out there that if you recruit a nutrition coach, then you must be some sort of elite athlete. Otherwise, it's a luxury and perhaps unnecessary. But the majority of my clients aren't elite athletes by any means, and we work on so many other areas of their life, which I think a lot of people think that might not necessarily happen. We just give them a nutrition plan that's geared towards athletes, whereas no, it's much more in depth than that. We look at every aspect of their life, and if you're not an elite athlete, that goes a lot further into lifestyle, not just nutrition around training, but lifestyle as well, stress levels, sleep, energy, you know, what's going on with work and family.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really great to get that message across that we can help with all of those aspects as well. We're not just there to support training and competition.
It is nice to know that, sorry, someone's calling me early. It is nice to know that, you know, just because I think the industry's come a long way, and I think we're seeing it more and more, and hopefully we've had a lot to do with people understanding that there's a difference between seeking an improvement in health and seeking an improvement in aesthetic, and that the two aren't necessarily directly correlated. I know when I was in my early 20s, like that kind of physique, that stage, like that was your epitome of health and fitness, and that was what everyone that, you know, I was training with, that I was hanging out with, that's kind of what we were all aspiring to be. In fact, to the detriment of our health in the most part, right? And I think that that's kind of been the forefront of what we've tried to get across is it's not my job to get you abdominals, right? It's my job to actually remove a lot of the fear and anxiety that you have from an ignorance when it comes to nutrition, so that you can understand how to best use it in order to achieve what you're after. Now, for some people, maybe that will be aesthetics fueled. For some people, that will be performance fueled. But for most people, and I think COVID has been a really good demonstration for us of this, is that there's a huge majority of people out there who are starting to understand just how critical a role diet plays in overall health, right? And
Yeah.
so whether that's coming from a trip to the doctors where you're receive some blood work that's not super favorable, or whether you've been told you're at risk of type 2 diabetes, or, you know, even if you're struggling with, you know, your forte, right? And change in, you know, going into menopause and things like that. Like, these are issues that everyone in the community is facing. These aren't strictly for just our athlete population.
No, there can be so many triggers that get people sort of through our doors, and quite a lot of my clients are a little bit older, sort of approaching middle age, and very often, you know, like you say, it might just be some blood work that they think, right, I've actually got to do something about it, or little things like they might be running around after their kids and just realize they don't have the energy anymore and they want that back, or they might see a picture of themselves or catch a reflection and think, oh, you know, well, I've gained some weight and it's just been creeping on over the years, and all of a sudden they've realized they've got to do something about it. And often as well, relationships with food. I think that's one of the most rewarding parts of our job, is to improve people's relationships with food. And again, I think that's another thing people don't realize. We can help them with that, and it's a huge part of what we do.
Yeah. It's nice to have that penny drop moment with a client, you know,
Yeah.
and it's almost a surprise. Like, it's almost like they don't believe that, one, that can work for them, or two, that they can have a good relationship with food. You know, whether it's been aspiring to societal pressures for decades and decades of having to look a certain way, and for many people that means to really, really overly restrict, and that is their relationship with food. Whether it's a reward-based system where they feel like their food is something that they have to earn. It's kind of nice to have those conversations after 3, 6, or 12 months with people, where it's, you know, they're not necessarily get these huge transformation, you know, photos that you'd see on the back of a bodybuilding magazine, but to have someone be like, I can go to a wedding and enjoy a piece of wedding cake and not feel like I have to go and sit on a treadmill for the next 4 hours the following morning, or starve myself for the 3 days leading up to it. You know, that is really what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are scared. By the time I have that initial consultation with them, they've been scared because they think they're going to be deprived. You know, they think to achieve what they want to achieve, they'll have to deprive themselves in some way, and that's frightening. And they think it's unachievable as well.
Yeah.
And it's just not the case.
Yeah. In
Not the
many
case
ways,
at
it's
all.
exactly the opposite, right?
Yeah. Like, you know, it's music to their ears when you tell people, no, on a Friday when you have, you know, a meal with your family, or a Saturday breakfast with your family, I want you to keep doing that.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, really? Wow, that's amazing. I'm like, well, you know, that's life. That's important. And a good plan that works for you shouldn't leave you feeling deprived of those really important rituals.
Yeah. I think the big takeaway too is people are surprised um, that we're not, oh, you sign up for 3 months or 6 months, and at the end of 3 months or 6 months, like you're done, right? Like you kind of finished up. It very much is, let's use the next 3 or 6 months to set in place, a little bit of education, a little bit of knowledge, and mostly some good habits that are going to serve you long term, right? Now, if allowing you to have pancakes on family, Sunday mornings with family, or a burger on a Friday night, or a couple of beers over the weekend, that might mean that ultimately it slows down the speed at which you get to where you're going. But it also means that, like, even though it's taking a little bit longer, the likelihood that you can maintain it is much higher. And definitely, what we've noticed within the community that we work is we don't have necessarily a weight loss problem. We have a weight management problem, right? People can lose 5 or 10 kilos quite easily, but it's
Yeah.
what happens then that we seem to be really struggling with. And that's why it is important to take into account all those lifestyle factors that you mentioned before.
Yeah, and just recognizing that it does take a bit of time. If you're going to take this approach and keep those things in, like you say, it might take a little bit longer if weight loss is your goal. But along the way, if it takes a bit more time, then you're just going to learn so much more. You're going to learn about good nutrition and good lifestyle practices, and also how your body responds as well. And that's not an overnight process. We're not in the business of getting you into your little black dress by Friday.
Yeah.
Think about how long it took you to get to the place you are when you decided to make that call to us, and be open-minded to the fact that it might take that long to undo those bad habits, for example, or rebuild your relationship with food. Negative relationships with food haven't formed overnight. So a
Yeah.
good coach is not going to tell you it can be fixed overnight. It's going to take some time, but you'll learn so much along that journey.
I feel like that definitely is an obstacle for many, is that they almost feel they're too far gone. They're too far the other way, or maybe they're, unfortunately, mid 40s, early 50s, maybe they feel like, oh, it's too late. Like I'm kind of into that twilight. And I think, the biggest messaging, particularly that you have for your older clients, is like, don't go quietly, like go down kicking and screaming. Like, yeah, we're all going to go down. But if you've got, if you're 65, statistically, you still have another 2 decades, right? So that's a
Yeah.
quarter of your life to just kind of sit idly by and wait to pass. Like, that's not the approach you want to have.
No, no. And quite often when you are that little bit older, you've reached a point, or I hear this very often with clients, they're just over it. They're
Yeah.
over it. They're like, right, I'm not taking this lying down. I don't want to be this weight anymore. I don't want to feel like this anymore. They want to take charge of their health. And maybe they find themselves a little bit more time to do that now.
Yeah. I think that tends to be a big part of what it is you come out of your 20s, your early 30s, you start a family, your priorities shift, there's a career. All of a sudden, like, your health and your own, I guess, like, personal endeavors seem to take little steps down that priority list, right? And particularly if you've got multiple kids and they're living at home, it could be, 20, 22, 23 years before you find yourself in a position where you can begin to bring uh, yourself up as a priority, right? And I
Yeah.
guess for us, what we're trying to say is you don't have to necessarily put yourself last all the time, and that by sometimes taking some time to put yourself first actually gives you more to give to others rather than less.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I say to mums all the time. They might be feeling guilty about getting childcare so they can train, but I'm like, well, you have to put yourself first. If you prioritize yourself, you'll be a better parent for it.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid of prioritizing your health. You'll feel so much better and get so much more out of the rest of your life if you put yourself first.
Yeah. I think I mean, obviously we've only got a 10-week-old, but even now you kind of think like, when she's a teenager, like, I don't want to just be like watching her play sport. Like, I want to be thrashing her. You know what I mean? Like, I still want to be dunking on her when she's 15 or 16. And so it's kind of, the things that you can do now to put into place to have those minimum standards that are eventually going to lead there. Right.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And it changes all the time. It might be hard to imagine, when you've got a 10-week-old or you've got, 3 kids. I'll never have the time. It can be hard to imagine being able to prioritize yourself, but it just changes as the years go by. There will be times where it's harder to fit things in and harder to follow a plan, but if you've got a good coach, it doesn't mean it's impossible. And over the years that will change. The time you have to give to it will change, your attitude towards it will change,
Yeah.
but it's never impossible.
I think that's another thing a coach does provide is it's permission, right? Like it's permission to actually allow you to have time to yourself to do things that are important to you without needing to feel guilty, right?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is too, I don't know anyone who has ever said to their parents, like, you're not giving me enough time because you're spending too much time working on your own health. Obviously, there's probably examples of that out there. But I think a lot of that guilt is, it's the same with that kind of food association, is that's all internally driven, right? And that really is that mindset reframing. That is a big part of our programs. And I think that is the biggest probably takeaway from this conversation is it's not, here's your meal plan, like slap on the ass, good luck, see you in 6 months. It's like such a, it's really only a small component of what we want to work on. And because it's easy as following as a plan, like we wouldn't have a job, we wouldn't have a business as coaches. It'd be easy for everyone, right? We'd be in a community that wouldn't have health issues because everyone would just be walking around super strong, super fit, super healthy, And I think,
that's right.
Yeah, part of the conversation that often gets let out is, when we want to do things, we do them long term, we do them right and do them once. And part of that is understanding why you think the way you think and how you feel the way you feel and what you can do to change that.
Yeah. I think people, as I said before, people are intimidated sometimes or frightened of starting a program because they think it's going to just equal deprivation and misery. Whereas I really try and focus on things that are achievable from day one, and that might be the smallest of things for the first couple of weeks. So increase your water intake or go for more walks, just to get that positive action in place and change their thought patterns slightly, so it's just not intimidating, because it can be really overwhelming for a lot of people to take that first step. Often the people who've reached that point of I'm over it, the worst thing you can do is try and fix everything overnight, because it's just overwhelming. So I really like to adopt that approach of small baby steps in the beginning and just get the ball rolling, and work a lot more on your language and self-talk and all of those things that set you up for a really great positive start.
Yeah, it's funny, when people decide they want to learn how to Olympic weightlift or they want to learn how to deadlift, the first thing they do is they recognize it's a skill they don't have that they want to learn. And so they'll go and, work with a coach specifically to work on those things. But, sometimes we get this vibe that people expect that there's a prerequisite for working with a nutritionist that you understand calories and macros and nutrient timing and supplement protocols. And that is again, that's our job. If you're not expected to be an Olympic level weightlifter when you start learning how to clean, we don't expect you to have a background in nutritional science to understand. And maybe that's something inherently that we never really considered when we named the company. Maybe putting macros in the brand was, in hindsight, a bit of a mistake when it comes to being able to bridge that general population, because I think a lot of people, don't really understand what macros are and then maybe feel like it's not the program for them. So if that's you and you're listening to this, that is certainly not the case. It's certainly
not at all.
By the time you're finished, you'll know exactly what it means, right?
Yeah. And I think also what we offer in that we give people the education they need. So they often come to us completely bamboozled with all the information that's out there on the internet, and they come with all these preconceived ideas of, they can't have carbs, or they can't eat after 6 p.m. Or perhaps they've tried something in the past that's worked, but it only worked for 6 weeks, and then here they are back in our door again. So it's really great for us to be able to set them straight, and say, you don't have to do this, or that doesn't work. There's no evidence supporting that. And it's a relief for a lot of people to go, oh, okay, that's not true. I don't have to do that. I don't have to deprive myself of food groups. So I really enjoy that part of the job as well, kind of giving people those light bulb moments.
Yeah.
And then realizing, actually, it doesn't have to be that hard.
Yeah. I mean, you don't get extra points for additional suffering either.
No.
And so I think that that's something that comes as like a welcome surprise, is like, well, you can eat rice and broccoli and chicken like if you want, but you don't have to. You don't get extra points because of how much deprivation you go through unnecessarily, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely repairing people's relationship with food and with self as well, and teaching people that they're worth the effort, because it is effort. Like learning any new skill or new language, it's going to take time. You're going to make mistakes. Okay? There's going to be times when it feels like you're doing everything right and things aren't changing. There's going to be periods of frustration. That's just part of the process. That's part of any learning process, and this is no different. But again, when you're going through that on your own, those tend to be those roadblocks that will derail, right? You've been trying for 2 or 4 weeks, you feel like nothing's changing, you feel like maybe you're doing it wrong, you're not convinced you're doing it right. Like this is why you have a coach, right? You can hand over all those fears, all those insecurities, all those uncertainties to us. We can hold them for you. We understand that you're feeling a little bit insecure, a little bit worried about what's going to happen, and take that into account, and we provide a program for you. But I guess particularly with how we support our clients, like we are probably too heavy in terms of support, and how often we want them, checking in and keeping us updated with all the little things along the way, so that we can, number one, catch those moments of derailment before they happen, preferably, or two, help get back on track as soon as possible.
Yeah. I mean, the emails I love receiving from my clients are the emails that tell me, they've had a success in, an experience with food, where they may have had a family dinner and they've had pizza or enjoyed a beer, and they've emailed me saying it was delicious and I didn't feel guilty. And then on Monday, it hasn't affected their weight either. The fact that they're really happy because it didn't affect their weight, but for me, I'm so happy because they enjoyed that meal guilt-free, and that's a huge step.
Yeah.
And I think much more important to me. I love hearing that over I've lost a kilo every day of the week, and people feeling empowered as well. I've had a client recently that just keeps emailing me, telling me how strong she feels and how empowered she feels with the changes she's made. She's taken charge, she's taken ownership of it. And the fact that she's got me to share that, celebration with,
Yeah.
is fantastic. It's really powerful.
It's like having a coach is like having a good friend, right? And I know that when you work with someone over 6 months and you're in touch on a weekly basis, you can't help but develop a little bit of a bond there.
Yeah.
And it's that moment when they decide, I've really enjoyed working over the last 6 months. I'm feeling much more confident and much more capable of where I am, and I'm ready to go out into the big bad world and try and see if I can do this on my own. It's almost like what I imagine seeing your kids off to college, or like taking training wheels off the bike, like that kind of feeling where obviously you're sad because you're not going to super regularly going forward, but you just like have this moment of pride where you're like, you did it, like go
Yeah.
out there and get after it. And if you need to come back, like you're always welcome to come back. But
Yeah.
I
That's
think
all right.
that goal of maybe it's a terrible business model, but that goal of getting every client to a place where, we're merely a source of convenience rather than dependence. That is the goal for every one of our clients, to get them to the point where they understand what they're doing, they understand why they're doing it, but it's just easier to have someone else, for accountability or for an objective set of eyes, to help be on their side and kind of call them out and keep them on track when they need it.
Yeah, I had a client recently come to the end of her term with me, and she used the words, I'm going to flee the nest," and that's exactly how that felt, as one of my little fledglings. But I was like, well, my work here is done, and that's fantastic, absolutely brilliant. And she's going to go out there now with, the right ideas, the facts, and using the tools we've given her, knowing how her body responds and what to do and how to troubleshoot things when they come along. And That's brilliant. And that's what we want ultimately, isn't it? To spread those messages
Yeah.
of good nutrition.
You feel like you get one back, don't you? Like with all the bullshit that's out there and all like the quick fixes and the pills and the potions and the snake oils. When you have a client that tells you they feel like, you know, they are empowered and they have the knowledge, they go out there, you feel like, all right, I've got one back. We've got
Yeah.
22 million to go just within Australia, but we've got one back on site, and that's a start. And eventually they'll all add up.
Yeah, that's right. That's the goal. Yeah. Just get
Um,
rid of the crazy stuff out there. Yeah.
it's definitely been an interesting time, and I think we were going to call this podcast, you know, overweight and overwhelmed, but obviously there's plenty of people out there too that, you know, are having the opposite goals when it comes to their training and the nutrition, and really struggling to put on and hold a healthy weight, whether that be because of issues like stress or you know, being unprepared and needing some tactics like that. But I think COVID has really highlighted, you know, regardless of what your goal is in terms of your body composition or your body weight, like there's a general feeling of being overwhelmed from pretty much everybody in the community right now. And a lot of that overwhelming, I believe, comes from, you know, stressing about things that we don't necessarily have any control over. And I think to bring it back full circle, giving yourself things to focus on that you can control, like your nutrition, like your activity levels, like, you know, trying to prioritize your recovery, can give you a better feeling of overall control of the situation that you're in. And I think for many people, that is something that really helps quell just general levels of anxiety, of unsureness. Because if you're the king of your castle, like at the moment, like especially, oh, we can go 5Ks now, but just being able to kind of have that sort of self mastery, it doesn't necessarily solve all the other issues out there that you've got going on in the peripheral, but it gives you the confidence to know that you'll be able to handle them, I think.
Yeah. I think this period in time, I've had to work with people on a much more kind of psychological basis. You know, I've done a lot more work with things like journaling, meditation, because COVID has kind of forced my hand to do that. I think people are more stressed or are suffering from more stress. And I am trying to get them to focus on what they can control. But also they might have the time to do this at the moment too. But they've now got those tools to take with them.
Yeah.
And it has given us a good opportunity to do that. You know, so many of my clients now are journaling and changing their language. And I hope they continue to do that beyond COVID and just recognize it as a great tool for when things, you know, things need a little bit of extra attention. Things get stressful again.
I think it calls into, or it calls into focus as well, you know, when something like a pandemic hits and you realize like how fragile or how insignificant a lot of the things that you feel like you're chasing after or working towards are, including things like a goal body weight. It kind of is the perfect opportunity to sort of instill a little bit of those kind of mindfulness tags. And, you know, why is this something that dominates your thought process day after day? And why is this something that you're so super regimented on trying to, you know, achieve? And really, like, what is the likelihood of achieving what you're telling yourself you need to achieve, and why do you need to achieve it? Right. I think when people set a goal weight in particular, sometimes arbitrarily, it's just a number they pluck out of the sky that they're all of a sudden super attached to. And having, I think, you know, as another benefit of having a coach is having someone to kind of look at that goal and say, is that a realistic goal? And what are the reasons behind it? And if fundamentally, if we're not, you know, competing in a weight class based sport, how super important is your body weight? Right.
Yeah, that's right. And people might say, you know, well, I want to be this number on the scale again. I said, well, why is that? Because that, you know, when I was 18, before I had 3 kids and I looked really great in my bikini, that's what weight it was.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that was maybe 20 years ago. And is it realistic? Let's think about, you know, the last 5 years. When were you happy? When were you confident in your skin? You know, and what kind of training are you doing now? That number can be very, very different. And for a lot of people, like you said, it's not even healthy to focus on that number anyway. It's about how you feel in yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually quite a insignificant percentage of the population that was at their healthiest while simultaneously being at their lightest, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. So I guess, for those of you out there that are thinking about getting started or wondering if it's for you, maybe if you've been at trying to achieve a specific goal for a long period of time and feel like you've starting and stopping and starting and stopping, or you feel like you're trying super hard and not getting any closer. It's kind of, what have you got to lose, right?
Mm.
And hopefully for most, if this is the sign you've been looking for to get started, here it is. But what we really want to do is overcome with people who are more scared about going further backwards, that they won't take the chance to move forwards, right?
Mm.
Um, and think about where
That's
you want
right.
to go 3 to 6 months, and that time is going to tick away anyway, right?
It does. It goes so fast. That's what I say to people. It takes a long time to form new habits. It just does. So it does take a little bit of time if you're going to do it right. If you're going to do it properly, and if you're going to enjoy the experience as well. We want you to enjoy the coaching experience with us.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
we
it's
do. We're in
yeah,
it for life.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, but I think people who do feel overwhelmed and just don't know where to start, stop worrying about where to start. Let us worry about that for you. Let us help you set some small goals into place and get some good habits flowing, and that's our job.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter if you haven't exercised or followed any sort of nutrition plan for years and years and years. Let us help you get started.
yeah,
It really doesn't matter where you're at when you come through our doors.
yeah,
It's the most rewarding part of our job is seeing people have those small successes, even if it is just drinking more water or going for a walk, because we know that those baby steps add up and get that person to their end goal. So that would be my message to people out there feeling overwhelmed. It really doesn't matter if you walk through my doors and fall in a heap of tears because you've been feeling over it and overwhelmed for 20 years. Let me take you by the hand and worry about those things and worry about how to get you started.
yeah. Rather than making it 21 years of feeling overwhelmed, right? I
Yeah.
think that's the thing too. There's no perfect time, right? And I like that, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, right? And the second best time is today. And it's not going to get easier. It's going to get harder, right? And so the further you kind of stray away from the things that you tell yourself you want to work towards, the further that journey is going to be. So yeah, definitely, if you're looking to get started, or even just like wanting to learn a little bit more about how we work, and even how we can help, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah. And even just ask, express your fears as
Yeah,
well. Ask us, say, whatever you're scared of, ask, is that going to happen? The answer is probably going to be no. But don't be afraid to ask those questions and be brutally honest. I mean, people often in their initial consult with me, if they are emotional, they feel embarrassed about that. I'm like, well, no, you please be honest with me. How can I possibly help you unless we start from this honest base?
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think, between 5 coaches and over 10 years, even more experience for each coach in the industry, like, no offense, but there's not a lot that we haven't seen.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
unfortunately not a lot about your specific case that makes you super unique that we're not sure how we can help.
No.
And at least, one of us between the 5 of us will have some clue of how we can get you started and get you progressing forward.
Yeah. And you might be surprised. We may have been through exactly the same thing.
Yeah, exactly right. It might be the very coach that you're working with has been on the exact same journey. And that's why, we are coaches.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. For anyone else who is looking for anything else, particularly by Coach Clare, the MTMM resources page is a really good one to look at. And that's probably another further demonstration of, the ebooks and stuff that we've been working to produce and get the information out there. aren't directed at elite athletes. They're directed to help general population. And that really is, again, the crux of what we're trying to do as a brand, is really impact and positively influence the health outcomes for as many people as possible. And for the majority of people, you know, whether you are looking to get ready for the CrossFit Open, or you are ready for the local throwdown, or if you just want to have a little bit more energy to be able to keep up with your kids, like, we can help.
Yeah, I agree. And I just think if you're feeling overwhelmed, don't know where to start, that's exactly when you should get in touch with us.
Now's the time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Claire. We'll chat soon.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you. See ya.